where would you say someone should spend their time? Like, how do you find the right type of companies, and how do you get the interview with the company that you want to work at?
So I always say it's kind of corny, but to get the job, you must do the job. And so honestly, like getting an SDR or an AE role is much like trying to book a meeting with a target account or trying to close a deal with one of your accounts as well. Like you've got to put in some work. It's tough for me to see on LinkedIn like 400 applications, 250 applications, right? And like, sure, some of the people that applied for that may not be qualified, but that's a lot more noise than what we saw maybe this time last year as far as applications go. So the hard thing about that is if you're just submitting an application, it's going to make it really hard to cut through the noise and get noticed, right? Because other people could have more experience, whatever, they could check more of the boxes, but like you still could be a good fit for the role. You just got to figure out how to overcome that noise. And so I think some really good tips of what you can do is one, connect with people that work there that are already doing the job. And why that's important is one, you can get a sense of who the people that are in that role today, what do they like? Do they like it? You can kind of pick their brain, but also two, they're then realizing you're applying for that job. And if, you're impressing them and going the extra mile, they're talking internally about you. So if somebody's applying for an SDR role in my team and I haven't met with them yet, but a couple of my SDRs have met with you and they're telling me like, oh, hey, this Paul guy, he's been like going crazy. He added us on LinkedIn, he's been talking with us, he bought us all coffee, was like picking our brain, had a bunch of good questions. I'm like, I got to meet this person, right?
Yeah.
Like this is somebody who's standing out in the interview process. And then I think another piece is, showing up really well prepared, knowing what the company does, right? Like knowing how they make money, knowing a little bit about your interview or doing some research. Like when people come, they're like, oh, I listened to that 30 Minutes to President's Club podcast you were on, or hey, I saw this really interesting, article, like want to ask you more questions about it. Like I love that because it shows me how they're going to be in the role. They're going to go above and beyond, and they're already starting to do some of the things that I expect from the role before they even get started. So I think
that
you
is
just
such
got to figure out how to stand out, right? And there's a lot of easy ways to do it. You just got to put in the work. And then the last thing I'll share is just you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, right? Like we all want to get the job, but also make sure like this is the right job and the right company for you, right? Like look at how
many. Hey, Parker, great to connect with you, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Paul, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Really was looking forward to connecting. Wanted to just hear, your story and get this in here before we hit the holidays.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be a part of it.
Sacramento area, El Dorado Hills. Is that where you're originally from?
Yeah.
Tell us, like,
grew up my whole life up in El Dorado Hills, and then after high school, moved up to Auburn, which is just right up 80 on your way to Tahoe, and then me and my wife kind of bounced around some areas up there, bought a couple different houses, and then now we're currently living in Lincoln, California. So about 45 minutes from where I grew up. It's a nice, small little town, just right outside of like Roseville. For those for the listeners that are familiar with the Sacramento area.
Yeah. No, I bet we've got a lot of Bay Area folks, and Sacramento is on the rise. It's one of the top 5 or 10, hottest real estate markets, and where people are definitely seem like. Have you noticed that? A lot of people.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think the biggest thing was one, it got so incredibly expensive to buy a home in the Bay Area. People were getting priced out with homes, like $1 million plus. So I think they were seeing one, like how much more house they could buy up here in Sacramento, but also for those that owned homes in the Bay Area, who bought them a long time ago, pulled out all their equity and came and bought houses cash. So it made it really difficult for people up in Sac that were from here, because you're competing with people who have a lot of money down or a lot of cash, and we're doing, over ask offers and things like that. So the real estate market definitely went crazy up here for a little bit, but I mean, there's been a house around the corner from me that's been for sale for 6 months. So
glad we've got you on here. We're going to dive into your current, role. You're leading sales development at Trade.io, and we're going to definitely want to kind of hear the ins and outs of that. But let's take it from right out of high school. Tell us, like, what was your first move out of high school? Did you look at universities? Did you pick a different path? Like,
You
what was
know,
your?
school was definitely never really my thing. It wasn't that I wasn't good at school. It was just, I don't know, it's just not where my passion, lied. And I think where my passion was was working, was making money. So I always had a job through high school. I'd started businesses as a kid through summers, things like that. And so when I graduated high school, I had worked through high school at a Big O Tires. So I just started, kind of straightening up, cleaning bathrooms, stuff like that. And then when I turned 18 in high school, I was finally allowed to start working out in the shop, changing oil, changing brakes, doing tires, little stuff like that. And then I remember my breaking point there was I worked like 100-hour paycheck at $8.75 an hour, and I thought I was going to be rich. And I think after taxes, I might have cleared like $700. I was very upset. Was like, okay, what am I doing? Ended up getting a job at a Ford dealership and made twice as much as I did at the Big O Tires, which was like a big step up. So worked at Ford for about 4 years. Worked on anything from like, a pickup truck all the way up to a semi truck, and saw my, income increase while I was there. But I think, some of my realizations were, okay, a lot of my friends now are graduating college. They're getting these cool like tech jobs where they work in air conditioning. They're making more money than me. They get to do all these cool company retreats and have all these perks. I work in this like hot warehouse every day with people that are, twice my age who've been doing this their whole life. And, some of them had made good money, but their bodies were destroyed and they were super salty and just hated it. And they always talked about, like, if you have a chance to go and do something else, like go and do it. So one day I finally just kind of took my parents' advice. They told me to get into tech. My mom worked for Xerox. My dad was at Microsoft, forever. And I finally listened to them. But it was really, really challenging though, like not having a degree, and trying to get a job at tech at the very beginning for sure.
Thanks for sharing. It's so interesting. I want to hear about that first step into the tech realm because it can be a big, like a big chasm to cross. But was it that role or what was your worst job ever?
I'd probably say my worst job was like Big O Tires because I was the high school kid and everyone I worked with was either like, they like to hire like convicts, like out of prison. And then also like people that were just like a little older, rougher around the edges. They were all super nice and like they took care of me, but they also like knew I was like the lowest ranking person and was like in high school. So they made me do like all sorts of crazy stuff that no one else wanted to do. And there's really nothing I could say about it to change it. So it sucked, honestly. I think just being at the high school kid with a bunch of adults that like took advantage of me, like made me do a lot of the hard jobs and, did some stuff that like probably wasn't super safe that they didn't want to do. But I don't know. I mean, I look back on it, like taught me how to work really, really hard. And I think it was super humbling to see like the kind of work people put in every single day to like put food on the table for their family. But definitely not something I want to do again, at least not for $8.75 an hour.
No. Dan, were you volunteering at uh, prison and like any of
Yeah.
those?
So while I was still working at Ford, I really just didn't want to listen to my parents. I was still at that age where, I was in my early 20s. And I'm like, I don't want to go into tech. I don't want a desk job. Like that doesn't sound fun, like I
Yeah.
want to do something more like active. So I thought, all right, well, I don't see a future in mechanics. So like, let me try to work for a police department. So I decided to like start going through the academy part-time and quickly realized like the reasons why I wanted to get into that were not at all what I should have been. Like, I just don't know. I think at the end of the day, my heart really wasn't in it. I just thought it was a way of like, okay, you can get in with no degree, right? You can make a lot of money. You could do a lot of good, but there's a lot of bad in that. I mean, there is some bad, like the people that actually work the job, but there's a lot of bad things that happen in that job. And I don't know. I just couldn't see myself doing that long term. I got to like the point in the training where we're doing like a lot of job shadowing. And I don't know, I just talked to a lot of the people that were out there working and they didn't even want to be there. And that was kind of a scary thing to me. I'm like, okay, I could make a lot of money doing this, right? With no degree. But it's a lot of work, a lot of nights, a lot of weird hours, a lot of holidays, big risk for potential injury or death. And then I'm talking to these people who have 10, 15 years on, and they want to do something else. So I'm like, now we're back to the Ford thing all over again, where it's like this other career field where people they just get stuck, and then they get to this age where they've just gone so far down, they don't know what else to do. And they're finally making, really good money. So they can't afford to take a step back. And so I'm like, I don't want to get into a role where I end up feeling that way one day. I want to get into something where, I can feel passion, but also I could see myself doing this for the rest of my life.
That's why we're talking. We want to hear. So, okay, we'll get to your best job, I think, later, a few stints in. So you take us through, how did you think about that first tech role?
It was, and they were not SaaS at all. So we were in the financial services space. So what we did was we bought bad debt and then try to recover, recondition, and then resell that debt, basically. So we're kind of like this middle person where we had relationships with the biggest banks in the country, and we would basically just buy bad debt, try to recover that debt or get that debt paid. And if we're able to recover that debt, then be able to recondition and resell. It was really great because I think it gave me a lot of the transferable skills to get an SDR or an AE role, where I made a ton of cold calls, worked a subset of accounts, worked them through different stages within the funnel. Learn how to overcome objections and learn different talk tracks, and I don't know, just kind of a lot of the skills that I lacked, I think, that were holding me back from getting, your traditional SaaS SDR or AE job. I think the hard part with that company was it was just so old school. They didn't have a lot of traditional levels, I guess you could jump. My job that I was doing was the same job some people had been doing for 10 or 15 years. And then your step out of that could be management, but okay, maybe I start to look for more of a traditional SaaS tech company, right? That's more new school thinking, has areas of growth and other opportunities for me to make more money and advance in my career.
Oh, that was Riskalyze?
That was Riskalyze, yeah. So it was a really funny story of how we even found Riskalyze. So I was working at Primeritas, and my dad saw Riskalyze in the newspaper, of all places. And it was because they were the fastest growing company in Northern California or something like that. My dad's oh, this company looks so cool. They're up in Auburn, near where you live. Me and my wife, Caitlin, had just rented a townhouse, 3 minutes from their office. And so I applied and started the interview process, and they didn't want to hire me at first. So I went from not getting jobs because I didn't have a college application to now not getting this SDR job because they felt like I was maybe a little overqualified for it, but they didn't feel I was qualified for an AE role yet. And they felt like, I wouldn't want to sit in that SDR role long-term. So I'm like, oh my, I just can't win, right? I just can't win. I ended up getting the job because I explained to them look, I'm taking a huge step back here from a pay perspective, but this is a completely new kind of industry for me. So I was able to finally, overcome some objections in the hiring process there and get a job. But honestly, I've got to thank them for giving me a chance, because I wouldn't have been here if I wouldn't have been able to make that switch.
Yeah, so great on you to at least find something and get the message across that you wanted in and you wanted to. No,
it wasn't all sunshines and rainbows, right? My base salary at Riskalyze as an SDR is $23,000. So I wasn't making a ton of money, and I was making probably $90K at Primeritas. So I went from $90K to a $40K OTE. And so I was working 2 jobs to make ends meet, honestly. And it wasn't I was living the life of luxury. It was a huge drastic cut in pay. And I had to figure out, we wanted to save for a house and do all this stuff. So I had to figure out a way to kind of supplement my income. So I was SDR by day. I was working at a restaurant by night, and that's just kind of what we were doing for a while until we made it.
Gosh, that is, it's helpful to hear. What that was in 2017, 2018.
Yeah, it wasn't even that long ago. I started beginning of 2017 there at the beginning of the year.
Well, no, congrats. I mean, and all the steps after. So then, just to read it out. So then you go to Alta Sales, which is a sales development shop.
Yep.
Then you go to Jifflenow, and so that was almost a year and a half to 2 years, and then you get to Gong.
Yep.
And I'm such a fan of their positioning and the brand, and a lot of what their product stands for. But I'm curious on your side, what did it feel like when you first got in and got the actual position?
So I think the things at Jifflenow were going so well, but we sold event tech. And so obviously going into the pandemic, event tech was dead, with events coming to a halt. And we hadn't yet figured out how to pivot to like virtual events. So to keep the company alive, like not only did we need to, cut a lot of heads, which we did, but we also needed to reduce everyone's pay as well. So that was obviously tough because going through a pandemic and trying to pivot your offering, we're working a lot harder than we were before, and everyone's making a lot less money. And so I really wasn't open to looking at new opportunities until that started happening. And, I put some work in. We worked, a few months through the pandemic trying to make it work, but it just was really tough. And that's when Gong reached out, actually, that they were looking to hire an SDR manager. And I'm like, okay, I've always used Gong at Riskalyze, and then I also use Gong at Jifflenow. I'm a huge fan. I know how to use the tool. It's something I'm passionate about. Like, this would be awesome. Like, sign me up for the interview process. So I started going through the interview process, and it was actually really funny. Like, I made it to the final rounds. I thought I was getting an offer. We talked compensation, everything, and they just randomly called me and let me know that they were moving forward with somebody else. They let me know on like the 4th of July, or like the weekend before the 4th of July, and I was just absolutely bummed. Like, I had not wanted a job so bad in a really, really long time, and I really thought I had it. And I think the biggest setback was I didn't live in San Francisco. And even though they were remote from the pandemic, they had plans to go back to the office, and they worried about hiring me in Sacramento and then me not wanting to come in, a couple times a week, which I was willing to do. I was willing to do whatever it took to get that job.
Right.
And so, of course, me being me, I wasn't going to give up. So actually, I sent an email to Ryan Longfield and Sandy Kochler, so their CRO and their CPO,
Yes.
to thank them, for taking the time to, interview me. I had wrote out kind of what I learned, my takeaways from the interview process. And my takeaways were that I still want to work here, right?
Yeah.
I learned a lot. And if there's ever a spot that opens up, like, call me and I'll start tomorrow, basically.
Yeah.
And so I sent that, and I didn't hear anything back. A week went by. Sandy emailed me. He was like, thanks so much for the follow-up. Like, appreciate it. Just like typical canned response. I was expecting to get no response at all. And
Yeah.
then randomly at like 10 o'clock at night on like a Sunday, I get an email from Ryan Longfield. And he was like, this email is exactly why, like, we need to work together at some point. Like, do you have time for a call tomorrow at like 11? And I'm like, okay, why does this guy want to jump on a call? So I'm like, sure.
Right.
So I'm out for my morning run early in the morning, get a random call from this, San Francisco number, and I answer. It's Ryan Longfield. And he's just asking me what I'm doing, out for a run. He's talking to me about running, and then he's just randomly like, "Hey, so you want to start working here, or still interested?" I'm like, "What?" So that kind of started my journey at Gong. I honestly never thought that I would get a job at a place like that. I was amazed, and honestly, that was something I struggled with at the beginning, was kind of that imposter syndrome of like, there's a lot of really talented people from really big orgs that are here, Salesforce, LinkedIn, like all the best, and then I'm just some like no name guy with no degree that worked at these small companies, and I'm here as well. Like, how the heck did I get a job here?
No, but that's incredible email. I want to see parts of it, or I don't know if you can ever share with me the email, but like that sounds amazing that you were able to get through that. And so, what role did you come in and you started as the sales manager, or what role did you?
Started. I took over one of their commercial SDR teams, and so like I inherited like, oh my God, there it was supposed to have multiple managers in that segment, and I started at a weird time. So I think they told me no in July, and I want to say I started in August was my first day. So it was like very quick how I turned a no to a yes, and played that follow-up game. But yeah, so I managed, I think it was at the beginning, 13 or 15 outbound SDRs in their commercial segment to begin with.
That's so incredible. No, well, congratulations. And like, there's so many people that are interviewing right now that are probably feeling that frustration and they're getting the no. And yes, it's about timing. And yes, there's things that you can't control, but I just love the spirit of that email that you sent to Ryan. And so I hope at some point that Ryan Longfield will be a guest on here because he's one of the LPs at Stage 2 Capital. What's one thing that you would never guess from the outside about Gong that once you're inside the tent and once you're working there, whether it's culture or something about the company, is there something that you can share with us? Like what's something that you'd never know or you'd never think, but when you get there, it makes a lot of sense?
I would say the enablement piece. Like their enablement team is absolutely amazing. Like Brandy Ringler and Nate and their whole team that all rolls up to them. They're a very impressive team. And the funny thing is, like, it's the same with their marketing team. None of these teams are that big. It's just the people on them are that impressive and that good that they can make an impact with a smaller team that maybe a larger team would need to do or need to have to be able to. So I guess that's my biggest thing, right? Is like the enablement is that good, and also, they really do use Gong internally, which I think is huge as well. And I mean, even not working there anymore, but out of all the tech we pay for here at Treya, I've been on Gong the most today out of everything.
What stands out when you think about how people use Gong? Like, what would you recommend? Or like, here's the two things that you definitely want to be operational.
I would say, first things first, like start small. I mean, it's a very powerful tool that does a lot, but I think you can get overwhelmed really quick. So I would start small on just one, like learning how to search for conversations within the tool and then filtering them by like different, keywords and trackers and things like that. And then what I like to do is work smarter, not harder, is set up auto updates that get sent to your email inbox when calls happen that meet the criteria that you want to coach on, right? So like, maybe a call that lasted for 2 minutes, that was this call disposition and outreach, right? Where no next steps were mentioned. Like, I want to know those calls, but I don't want to have to go search for them. I just want to know when they happen. And then I can go in, listen, give coaching, and we can correct, maybe some of the behavior or areas where we fell short. But I mean, even like right now, I'm setting up some like competitive differentiator training for my team. And it's cool to look back and see like, we might know as a company who we think our biggest competitors are, but Gong will track how often they come up in deal cycles, right? And so that's helpful for me to know, out of our competitors in the kind of the iPassic integrations API space, like who do I do differentiated trading on first, right? Who should my main competitors be? And so it just helps me in so many different ways,
Absolutely. No, thanks for sharing that. I think it'll be really useful. So I'm going to swing us over to the next segment where we talk about product-led growth, PLG.
Yeah.
And, you've probably seen a lot of this the past couple of years. It's a hot topic. What's your definition of product-led growth?
Yeah. So I think when I think of like product-led growth, it's where people are coming in and they're getting to use the tool prior to buying it. And that helps like justify the purchase, right? So I guess it'd be similar to like if we were doing like a POC. The thing I don't like about it is if I'm running like a POC, I can structure it, right? Where it's like, I know what parts of the tool that you need, what challenge it's going to solve for. Like I can tie a business case, to it. We can have that like proof of value, but with product-led growth, when you're just going there on your own, I feel like it's the same thing as like signing up for a free trial, right? There's not a lot of people that are actually going to log in and start building in there or start using it, right? Because it's free and there's really no urgency for you to, I guess, like spend a lot of time in it. So I think with product-led growth, I think it's important to, one, to make it really easy for people to log in and get started, but also have some ways to invite them to some sort of an office hours or have some sort of a training or things like that on how they can get started, in your product. Because I feel like a lot of people will just log in and they'll never do anything in it. And I just don't, I can't say the conversion rates are that great when that happens. Like I know our trials, our best converting trials are people that come in and build within our platform, right? And then continue on to an evaluation.
That's interesting. And how do you all track? Like, is it a dashboard you're looking at? It's within Trade.io, and you're thinking, have they done X number of activities, or is it that they've invited in a couple of their team members, or are they accomplishing certain actions that then you can kind of sort through, like, this is an account that's just getting started, or this is an account that we should be helping or we should talk to?
Yeah, so all this automation is all done through Tray. So, just like Gong, we power, our whole company on Tray, which is really nice. So Tray manages a lot of our automation on routing of these trials when they come in, and then also rerouting if certain things happen, right? If they start building or they accept the trial, they log in, things like that, just to make sure it gets routed to the right person based on geography, company segment, and territory. So that makes it really easy for us. But then also too, like, in our business intelligence tools, we can also track the trial conversions as well. And so we can see, the conversion rates if somebody logs in and doesn't build anything versus somebody who comes in and starts building, right? Before they're even paying for us, right? And I think it's so much to like Slack, right? Like Slack has done a great job from the product-led growth standpoint. The thing about Slack, though, that's different for so many different companies is like we could use Slack for free for a really long time. We just have to start paying for it once we want like our messages to be stored and we want more features. Where like a lot of other companies, product-led growth, it's pretty much just like a trial that you can initiate on your own without having to like go through a salesperson.
Do you think SDR, BDRs are going to start finding that next year or in 2024 that does their day in the life change, or is this actually going to reduce the number of roles and kind of reduce the size and footprint of these teams in SaaS? Or are some of these great people who are SDRs and BDRs, like, are they going to move and become a different team and roll up to, marketing?
If we're still on the product-led growth side, I mean, it depends on if they can create if your company can create like a self-service model, right? For them to like come in as a trial, start using it, and then be a paid customer. And where I see that working really well is then like SMB space. And I think honestly, a lot of companies right now are probably realizing if they did spend a lot of time selling to the SMB, that it hasn't been super stable revenue right now through this economic downturn. And so I would presume a lot of companies are going to be looking to move up market. And so, I think what a lot of companies are going to be doing is maybe creating, maybe lessening the heads from the SDR side in those territories, trying to build more of a self-service model for like smaller revenue generators. And then they're going to move that support up market and start doing some outbound, right?
That's interesting. So you're saying that, yeah, some of the focus will be for the larger deal sizes and to go up market.
I think another piece too is, a lot of companies are working on, NDR. And, obviously a big thing with NDR is expanding on current customer accounts. I think that companies will also start placing SDRs with like account management or growth teams to start prospecting into current customer accounts too. Right. And I think that's another huge piece. So I don't see, I don't see, those SDR roles vanishing. I just see them getting repurposed into what companies are caring about now, which is like, let's go up market, let's get more stable revenue, let's get some big logos. But then also too, like we need to figure out a way to expand on our current accounts. And I mean, SDRs would be awesome at that.
So maybe what you're saying is, in certain ways, if you're a sales development rep or a business development rep and you're still early in your career path, focus in on, there's a lot of these customer success metrics like NDR, net dollar retention, looking at things like NPS scores, net promoter score, and the CSM teams typically have, the customer success teams, they have these different metrics that they're always tracking for. Revenue retention going up, and you try to, 120%, 150%, those high numbers of customer bases that are growing and
Yeah.
seeing
And I
an
think that's like the North Star that a lot of VCs are looking at right now to give out funding. Honestly, it's like, what does your NRR look like? And I think they're going to be looking for over 100%. But honestly, what I've heard is like 120 plus is kind of like you're doing really well. I think because a lot of companies obviously built a ton of revenue, right? I mean, gosh, at Gong, when I started, we were like 40 million. And when I left, I mean, we're over 200 million in a very short amount of time, right? But I think a lot of VCs are seeing that, how much of that was just growth from the pandemic and everything that was going on, but also how much of that is like renewable, scalable, stable revenue, and then how much is that going to churn with like the economic downturn. I think that's why they're kind of shifting gears of like, okay, ARR growth is impressive, but like, what is your NRR, right?
Yeah. No, I definitely felt that these past couple of years, I was at Hopin. There's been a lot of fast growth, and now there's been a real focus on, well, it's not about either growth through acquisition or growth through new product release, or just new segments or new, geos. Now it's about really slowing down and looking at sustainable businesses that can control their, efficient spend, but have the right process, the right playbook to have recurring revenue and high, high renewal rates. So
yeah, and I think the SDRs being more a part of that will help kind of make them a little bit more recession proof as well, right? Where they're providing even more value for the business than they already were.
Get us to the next segment here, which is our investor corner.
Yeah.
So here's where we cover investing, finance, hobbies, side hustles.
Definitely.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So how would you describe your investing focus or investing strategy?
Yeah, so I try to make my investing strategy very easy. I just don't want to deal with it. I don't really know a ton about the investment space as far as like the stock market and things like that go. I have a general understanding, but I'm not a financial advisor, and nor could I make it as like a stock trader. So I just have an advisor that I hired a couple years ago, and basically what I set up with him is I just do my budget every year of how much I think I can contribute every 2 weeks from one of my paychecks into retirement accounts and emergency fund accounts for me and my wife. And so why I like that is I just don't have to think about it. The money automatically comes out of my paycheck or out of my bank account. They take care of all the investing and things like that. And then I can, log in or get statements in the mail if I'm interested in what my balance looks like. But that's supposed to be there for the next 30 years or more, however long I want to put it in there. But the earlier you start doing this, it's really amazing. I mean, if you start working with a financial advisor, they can show you, even if you just put in $1,000 a month, every month for the next 30 years, like what that will look like at the end of your career. It's pretty amazing. And so the earlier you start doing that, the better. I didn't start doing that till I was 26, I believe. So not late by any means, but I probably could have started it quite a bit earlier.
That's the piece that I think, just 26 is a great moment to start. And I think I was right around there also. But it's funny to think back, like just there's some folks who, for whatever reason, are able to start it off, even when they're in high school, and they're just, even if it's only $100 or $200 or $500, like whatever you can start actually setting aside. I know it seems crazy, when you're in your early 20s, it's like that money is precious.
Yeah, I think the other piece is too, like looking for pre-tax retirement as well. Financial advisor, he helps out a lot with like Roths, traditional like stock accounts, and then like our emergency fund. But obviously, we need help from a tax perspective with all the tax we pay on commissions in the sales game. So contributing to your 401k at work is also great, regardless if they have a match or not. Again, it's just easy, automatically gets deducted. You don't have to think about it. You probably pay some of that money to taxes anyway. So, just kind of figure out how much money you can comfortably put in there on a every 2 week basis.
Do you remember when you first picked your financial advisor, did you work with one of the big, Charles Schwab or Vanguard or Fidelity, or did you work with someone local and you wanted to
So
talk to them?
I did start big names, right? And so uh, the thing with that, like what I learned was I was paying that person money and they really weren't doing anything for me. Once they got my account set up, like their big, huge, wirehouse they were working with was doing all the work. So they had me in some sort of automatic, trading, portfolio or model where like he just put my money in there, charged me fees, but yet really wasn't doing anything. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I met a guy at my gym who is a partner of his financial advisory firm, and he's a part of, I guess, what's called an RIA. So they're kind of independent. So they clear through LPL, but they are their own independent business. So they're not like a Morgan Stanley or something like that. And I was asking him, as I saw I was paying a lot of fees, monthly, and I asked him to kind of get his thoughts, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sure he's doing a good job investing you. Like, if you want me to take a look at it, I will." So he looked at it and was like, "I don't think what he's doing is necessarily bad, but you are paying him quite a bit of money and he's really not doing anything for you. He's got you in like an automatic model that does everything for him. And so like you're paying him, you're not really getting anything in return. Here's what I would do differently. And I would also charge you half as much as what he's charging you." And so I just developed a relationship with this guy, and, I came into his office and he didn't treat me like a kid, right? Like he treated me like it's not like I had a lot of money either.
Sure.
But he treated me like, I felt pretty special. I came in, he got me lunch and, just kind of like, I don't know, it was a really cool experience. Walk me
Yeah.
through like my goals in life and what I want to do and all sorts of things like that. And I don't know, I just left feeling like, okay, if I'm going to pay someone money to like manage my money, like this is the person.
Yeah.
So I kind of wish I would have done maybe a little bit more research before, picking a financial advisor the first time. But honestly, you know what? That first person got me started. And
I think that's the thing for people when they're just starting out. I mean, I've heard the two different pathways of find someone who can help you chart things out and think in short-term goals and long-term planning. And if you have that personal, someone at your local branch, or if you have someone in your network, like I think that can be really powerful because you get to ask these questions, you get to have a little bit more clarity around, hey, in 5 years, in 10 years, like this. The other approach that, I see people talk about all the time is just the, like the Warren Buffett methodology of like put your money into the S&P 500, put it in an index fund.
yeah,
And that, that is probably the lowest fee, but it's the lowest amount of help.
yeah.
And that's something you just do online or do automated.
Yeah, that's like my grandma thinks it's silly to pay anyone to do it. You can do it yourself. And I mean, hey, if you want to do it yourself, like more power to you. It's definitely possible. I don't know. I just got to think about, I manage sales development teams. I'm not going to give people advice on how to invest their money, right? But like somebody actually went to school for this, that it's their life, it's their passion. So I'm like, I'll just pay them money to do it for me.
It's not a crazy, some folks are in, the startup and tech world, like obviously are very pro like the robo investing firms. Like there's like Betterment and there's a few other, there's platforms that you can just kind of create like one or two of the index funds that you want to track, and like you're just doing auto investing from your paychecks. But to your point, there's something to be said for just like how a founder is often, they're going out and looking for contract work or design experts or SEO experts, and they kind of say like hire all the right people to just get the job done and get you from A to B to C.
Right.
It sounds like you're saying like just you like to tap the expert and let it be something that it's off your plate. You don't have to worry about it. Let them just keep things.
And that's what I've had to learn too. Like leading teams, you got to learn how to like delegate. You can't take on everything. Like I don't have the time to want to deal with all that too. But also I would probably kick myself if I made some mistakes and lost myself money,
A new app. Is there something you've been using as of late that it's either a productivity or a work tool or a personal app or a personal tool, anything that like we can call it?
I'll shout out the Nooks team. So if you haven't checked out Nooks, Nooks is a virtual sales floor. It solves a big pain for remote teams, specifically SDR and sales teams, because like my team, for instance, scattered all over the country and then in the UK as well. None of these people have really gotten to meet anyone in person. We've been a remote first company. Everyone's been remote through the pandemic. We really haven't had a chance to all get together probably until
Yeah.
next year. So people would see each other in Zooms and things like that, but we had a really hard time like building this like camaraderie and like team culture. And so I brought Nooks in, and people hang out in Nooks every single day, but I don't want people to think like people just hang out in there and BS. People go in there and work, and why it's been productive is I'll finally see someone else dialing. And it's like, oh, I should probably get on the phone. Or if I have problems with like a conversation I'm having, people can hear it and give me advice. They can help me with emails. We've had AEs come in and listen to people making calls. I mean, it's really, really fun. And so now I have people that are in there every day, 3 to 4 hours a day working, and then obviously doing some work on their own as well. But that's just kind of the time they spend in Nooks. And it's funny. We've got a couple like hype people on the team where like when they're out of office, like Nooks isn't as much fun because they kind of bring like the energy. But I've been really impressed with their team. Just working with them has been awesome, and their tool is awesome too. And I'd say on top of the virtual sales floor, they also have a dialer, an auto dialer, and the cost of that auto dialer compared to some of their competitors, way more affordable and realistic for a small company like us to purchase. So.
Interesting. I've heard about it. I haven't actually seen. So how would you describe, like, I'm used to the old school world of like, dialing like InsideSales.com or like plugins through Salesforce. And like this was, 10 years ago plus, right? Like back in the day, that's how I was all, we had the old Wix office, and it was just a line of like 30 SDRs, and we were all in a tunnel and just hammering the phones. Like what does it feel like? Is it like a virtual Zoom meeting, or is it like a Slack community and you can see everyone else?
It's kind of like a virtual meeting like we're on today, except there's different rooms you can go into. And the cool thing about it is it integrates with all of like the sales engagement platforms. So when I'm making a call, it mutes everyone else automatically. And that's the biggest problem. Like I've run call blitzes at Gong where, we make calls on Zoom, but the problem is there's always background noise, right? If someone's talking, it's very distracting. People get frustrated and jump off. With Nooks, it's really cool. They built it for this purpose. So if I'm dialing and picking up the phone, I won't be able to hear you, but you can hear me if you want to. So you can learn from me or give me coaching or whatever. But on the flip side, I don't get distracted by the conversation you're having or if you're on the phone. And the other cool thing about it is too, I can launch my Spotify and I can play Spotify for everybody. And once I pick up the phone and start dialing, it'll mute my music as well.
And now you're saying like Nooks makes that whole experience. So it feels like you're all on the same floor. Everyone's listening to music. And then that's so nice that
their auto dialer is cool too. Cause like, again, like it's just all wrapped into one system. So you're on Nooks, it's integrated with our outreach. And then you just have this auto dialer. And the nice thing about it is like, I don't want people to think just because I have an auto dialer, I'm going to get more connects. You still have to have good data, right? But it just helps you make more calls in a shorter amount of time. So you can spend more time talking to people on the phone and less time going through, line by line call tasks.
For anyone who's out there who's thinking about their next role, like come January, come February, what would you say to someone who's an SDR or an AE or, really anyone playing their next step? Like where there's so much noise out there. LinkedIn is this beautiful place. There's lots of all these amazing people sharing actionable help. So then there's a lot of just noise that comes in there. Like, where would you say someone should spend their time? Like, how do you find the right type of companies, and how do you get the interview with the company that you want to work at?
So I always say it's kind of corny, but to get the job, you must do the job. And so honestly, like getting an SDR or an AE role is much like trying to book a meeting with a target account or, trying to close a deal with one of your accounts as well. Like you've got to put in some work. It's tough for me to see on LinkedIn, like 400 applications, 250 applications, right? And like, sure, some of the people that applied for that may not be qualified, but that's a lot more noise than what we saw maybe this time last year as far as applications go. So the hard thing about that is if you're just submitting an application, it's going to make it really hard to cut through the noise and get noticed, right? Because other people could have more experience. whatever, they could check more of the boxes, but like you still could be a good fit for the role. You just got to figure out how to overcome that noise. And so I think some really good tips of what you can do is, one, connect with people that work there that are already doing the job. And why that's important is, one, you can get a sense of who the people that are in that role today, what do they like? Do they like it? You can kind of pick their brain. But also, two, they're then realizing you're applying for that job. And if, you're impressing them and going the extra mile, they're talking internally about you. So if somebody's applying for an SDR role in my team and I haven't met with them yet, but a couple of my SDRs have met with you and they're telling me like, oh, hey, this Paul guy, he's been like going crazy. He added us on LinkedIn, he's been talking with us, he bought us all coffee, was like picking our brain, had a bunch of good questions. I'm like, I got to meet this person, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is somebody who's standing out in the interview process. And then I think another piece is, showing up really well prepared, knowing what the company does, right? Like knowing how they make money, knowing a little bit about your interviewer, doing some research. Like when people come, they're like, oh, I listened to that 30 Minutes to President's Club podcast you were on, or, hey, I saw this really interesting, article, like want to ask you more questions about it. Like, I love that because it shows me how they're going to be in the role. They're going to go above and beyond, and they're already starting to do some of the things that I expect from the role before they even get started. So I think that you just got to figure out how to stand out, right? And there's a lot of easy ways to do it. You just got to put in the work. And then the last thing I'll share is just you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, right? Like we all want to get the job, but also make sure like this is the right job and the right company for you, right? Like look at how many steps the interview process has, how many people need to get involved. Like some of these can be, telltale signs of like what it would be like to work there. Like I was in an interview process with a company I really thought I wanted to work at, and they were going to have me meet with, I felt like every leadership person in the entire company. And coming in as like a director level of that company, I'm going, great. How are we ever going to get everything done if every single person in the company needs to sign off on a decision, right? And so to me, I'm like, okay, not only is this a huge pain in the ass from an interview perspective, because I'm doing more in the interview process than I would in a full-time job, but also too, like, what is life going to be like working there? And so that's something I want to remind everyone as well, is like, hey, trust me, if you don't have a job today and you're trying to find one, it's tough. And I know there's urgency to go find one, but also just make sure that you're finding that next right step for you. And it's checking your boxes and you're just not trying to check theirs.
Yeah. People listening to it will really feel like that's helpful for when they get back from the holidays. So, no, hey, Parker, great to just chat with you. Thank you for joining and thanks for being a guest.